Hello, welcome to this video where I'll be talking about rewatching movies. This is kind of a video response to FK Vlogs, who put up a video today or yesterday about rewatching films and films that she'd seen this year in 2017 and going month by month of the films she picked up and which ones she'd like to rewatch by the end of the year to set a goal for herself. I'm not going to kind of talk about that myself in this video too much, but just the idea of rewatching films. And I'll tell you what, I've been filming so many reviews over the past 3 weeks. I just want to talk about films without having to go into the plot, without having to kind of like really think about it. I just want to relax a little bit, talk about some films and get some discussion going with you guys about the topic, which is something I think about a lot, and that is rewatching films. How much do you rewatch a film? And everyone's different, of course. When I see people in the YouTube movie community talking about how they'll rewatch a film like 3 or 4 times in a month, and I'm like, eesh, like that's not for me. You know, obviously each to his own, there's nothing wrong with that, but for me, the issue I have is that there's so much to be discovered out there in terms of films, and I watch a lot of older films. You know, I like to keep as current and up to date as I can with new films, but I keep getting dragged back to the 70s, 60s, 50s, 30s, 20s, you know, all these older films. I'm really interested in seeing these classics that are just waiting for me to discover and enjoy them. Today I watched a film from 2000 and it was incredible, you know, and I'm so glad I watched it. That's the thing, is that when I think, okay, do I really want to watch, you know, Star Wars again? Or do I want to spend 2 hours watching a film that, you know, I could hate, but I could also love? There's a thrill in the chase of that, you know. There's obviously the films that get talked about a lot and you know that they're going to be great in some way and that you'll probably like them. You learn to build up a gauge of what you know you're going to enjoy. It doesn't always work, it's not foolproof, but for the most part, you know, there's films where you're like, I'm going to enjoy that and I haven't seen it before, let's check it out. So I really value my movie watching time, especially now when I work so much. A year or two ago I didn't have as much work on my plate, and so I could kind of, you know, be a bit more free with things. But even then, I really don't jump back to films too often unless they're films that are so good that I can't wait to show them to Connie. That's really the only time is when I want to show a film to Connie. There's The Sting with Paul Newman and Robert Redford, which I watched and just thought that's one of the best films I've ever seen, and the next day I showed it to Connie and said, you have to watch this film, it's incredible. Things like that. Captain Fantastic was a film that I watched last year and fell in love with, and watched it about a month later to show to Connie specifically, and she loved it too. So there are those films that are so good that you can rewatch them very soon afterwards, but for me, I like to keep some distance as well. That's another aspect. Time will change things. A good example of that is The Wolfman, for me personally. A Universal monster movie from 1935, I believe. Or maybe even 41. I think it's 41 or 40. Yeah, it's definitely the 40s at least. 35 was Bride of Frankenstein. So it's The Wolfman, starring Lon Chaney Jr. I watched it 2 years ago. It was good. I enjoyed it. Wasn't great. You know, it was, you know, a little bit, yeah, you know, well done and everything, looked nice and stuff, but I didn't really get too much out of it. This year, I rewatched it for the Epic Film Challenge 2, 1,001 Movies You Must See Before You Die. And I loved it. I thought, that's so good. And I had no idea. It really depends. I mean, it can be where you are in your life, the things that have happened to you, the experiences that you have inside you that you bring to the film that's being shown to you. Or it can be the time of the day. It can be how tired you are, how alert you are, how distracted you are. It can be the weather. You know, I watched Phenomena. Was it back in, you know, maybe the middle of the year sometime. And the beginning of the film has this scene where like the wind is sweeping through this valley and the trees are swishing, and I had the window open and the fan on and the wind was sweeping around my legs and it was just perfect. Like, oh, I felt like I was there, you know. So those things, you know, can kind of help, but you shouldn't really try to emulate those things. Okay, there's a windy scene, let me open the window, but it just happened that way and it was really cool and it kind of augmented the experience. But there are films that I've seen that I have loved and I'm almost fearful of going back to in case they're not as good as I remember. One of those would be Warrior from 2011, starring Tom Hardy and Joel Edgerton. Saw that in the cinema. #1 film of the year. Incredible. I've never seen it since. I've almost been worried to revisit it. I bought it on Blu-ray, and that's another thing I would talk about, is buying films on Blu-ray. I really don't buy new releases, like hardly at all. The last one was probably Logan. And I think that's the only film of 2017 that I've bought on Blu-ray, after seeing it in the cinema at least. Because, you know, even Rogue One, look at the Star Wars nut that I am. I haven't even bought Rogue One yet because I saw it twice in the cinema. I saw it again after that, and I'm good. You know, I love it. I think it's great, but I'm not really dying to go back to it anytime soon. So I haven't bought it yet. Things like that, you know, the latest Marvel movies. I love all of them. I really do. I get so much enjoyment out of them, but I don't really feel like rewatching them that much. When I could spend that 2 hours, you know, which I can, you know, happily enjoy on those films, but it could be 2 hours where I'll be getting something more out of, like a, you know, like a French film or something, or a silent film, or a Japanese film, or a newer film. That's another thing. I like to kind of look at the more under the radar movies, you know, and one of the films that the FK Vlogs was talking about for 2017 was Table 19, which is one of those like under the radar films, and I wanted to check it out, so I did, and I really enjoyed it. Not a lot of people rated it very highly, but I thought it was really good. It was one of those films where it's so predictable. You're like, okay, I see exactly where this is going. You got this group of people on this table at a wedding. They're all the outcasts, the misfits. I'll leave that one in for free. And you know, they're all gonna, you know, bond by the end of it and learn something by the end of it. But you know, predictable but really enjoyable and just funny and charming and sweet, and you know, very good actors and stuff. So I like seeing films like that. And there's always a risk in when you go to those under the radar films, because they could be under the radar for a reason. And there's been quite a few of those as well this year, but there's some that are really, really worth it. Films that people aren't talking about that are just incredible. So I like to spend that movie watching time on something that could be, you know, a great viewing experience, and could be something that I like to go into films blind a lot of times. I don't like to look into the plot too much, you know. If it's a director or an actor that I like to just give it a chance. One of those would be A Ghost Story from this year. Purely based on the director and Casey Affleck and Rooney Mara, who'd all collaborated before on a film called Ain't Them Bodies Saints, which I loved, from 2013. A Ghost Story. I thought, I can't wait that this is going to be great. I'm going to love it. I didn't like it that much, you know, so that's another example of it. It doesn't always work the way that you want it to. If you think that I'm going to love something, you know, sometimes things change. Things really do change. She was talking about Moana as well, and how she wanted to enjoy that more than she did. That's another film for me where the first time I saw it, I thought, that was great, I really enjoyed that, but it was really predictable. It just followed all the Disney beats, you know, it felt like Lion King, it felt like this, it felt like that. It was predictable, but it was really good, even though it was predictable. Then I watched it again and loved it, and then like the soundtrack just didn't leave my head for weeks, and it's become one of my favorite Disney films ever. You know, just rewatching things really can help or sometimes hinder your enjoyment of a film. It's a really interesting practice, you know. With my very, very favorite films, again, I like to leave it with something like Aliens or Back to the Future or Star Wars, Empire Strikes Back, my favorite film of all time. I can't watch it all the time because it'll lessen somewhat. It's nice to leave at least a year. That's my golden rule, is at least a year before you rewatch your favorite. Unless it's something like, you know, you want to show it to someone. Like, oh, here's my favorite, like show it to my brother or something. That's an exception. I'm talking about when you sit down and watch a film for yourself, or, you know, if you're with someone, with your partner. You know, I like to leave at least a year, unless it's within special circumstances. I just watched Blade Runner last week, the night before we went to see 2049, and I was just like grinning. This film is so good. Like, every time I watch it, it just seems to get better. So I'll leave it at least another year now before I go back to it, you know. Even though I feel like watching it again, I like just giving it that space. But yeah, rewatching. Where do you sit on rewatching, and how often do you do it? And how much do you try and prioritize the films that you watch? Again, like I did that video, The List, where I talked about my rankings of films from 2016. I want to get to doing my 2015 list, but there's a handful of films I want to rewatch first, so I can really judge that top 10 as, you know, better than I could a few years ago. Or there's a few that I haven't seen for 2015 that were really notable that I wanted to get to and never did. So it'll probably take at least until December before I do that video, because right now I'm just knee-deep in preparing my Asian cinema season in November, which has been an amazing experience so far, because I'm watching primarily films I've never seen before, and in some cases completely blind watches that I've just found and watched, and it's been awesome so far. So I can't wait to share with you in November some of those films I've been watching and experiencing, and that'll probably be a series where not a lot of people will watch because it'll be more obscure films, but I'm really passionate in those videos, so give it a chance. That's just my little kind of teaser for Asian cinema season. It's been going really well so far. I've been kind of pre-planning and making and editing videos and so on. But anyway, I'll leave a link to FK Vlogs video down below. I really like the idea, but for me there won't be many of this year that I'll be rewatching. You know, Force Awakens, like, I absolutely loved everything about that film. Bought it on Blu-ray, watched it once, haven't touched it since because I don't want to keep going back to it. Although I did show it to my mum, and that was an exception because it's a different experience when you share it with someone else. So I'm happy to rewatch films if I'm showing it to someone else, because then it's a different experience. But when I'm sat by myself, that's 2 hours I could be spending on something else. And for me, the possibilities are endless. You go back to the silent era animated films like all across the world. You know, I'm kind of trying to split both my kind of movie watching brains between current stuff and older stuff, which are both interesting to me in different ways. So there we go, that's my thoughts on rewatching movies. Let me know your thoughts down below. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.
He's alright by me. Apart from the fact he throws cans of Carlin into a tree. Yeah, he's really cool. Yeah, he's really cool. But he's not quite as cool as you, 'cause